Hey, deserving listeners, Love is Blind, the reunion. Let's check it out.
Clay, would you ever date her again?
1,000%.
Oh my gosh.
Okay, so they're talking with Clay and AD, and they're reviewing what happened at the wedding, and AD was saying how hard it was to watch her have a meltdown, which I can imagine. Clay is doing that thing where he talks very glowingly about AD, which I think is the right choice, but it is kind of disjointed with what he did. But I don't know. I guess it could be true that he very much respects AD and very much cares about her and likes her and maybe loves her, but also just isn't ready for, I don't know, that doesn't really fit with my ideas of humans. There's this notion that like people, particularly men, have a hard time with commitment, right? And I think a better way to put it is that people have a hard time with, one, sacrificing the opportunity to date other people, and two, they have a hard time with breaking up. And so if they commit, then that introduces the possibility of them breaking up with somebody. It also introduces the possibility of someone else breaking up with them, which some people do avoid commitment for that reason. People don't generally avoid commitment. People like commitment. Even people that seemingly never have commitments in their life. Generally speaking, not everybody, but generally speaking, people are oriented towards being in secure, committed, dedicated, long-term, understanding, knowing each other sorts of relationships. But given people's issues, given his upbringing, you could see that it would be kind of complicated for him because he doesn't trust that that would ever be a good thing. Or how do you deal with the fact that you have desires with other people? He certainly wasn't modeled how to manage that, right? But anyway, he's being very nice and complimentary. It seems genuine, but it also could be that salesman side of him. And then they ask him, would you ever date her again? And he's like 1,000%. And AD's like, no. And yeah, my impression is that there's still the understanding that he doesn't want to be with her. But I don't know, I guess maybe he's like, I wouldn't mind dating, but I don't think I'm ready for marriage yet or something like that anyway. I'll also say that they asked AD first, which is the right thing. Would you ever date him again? And she looked at him. She looked at Clay, which is I don't know, but it's another moment where she doesn't speak from herself. Why not answer that question? By looking at him, what I think she's saying is, well, it depends on him. I don't make decisions like that. 'Cause, that's a theme with her presentation on the show and the edit. She didn't break up with Matthew. I mean, some people in the comment section on that video that I posted, that scene, were saying that she was kind of hanging him out to dry, which is possible, but it's also possible that she enters into a mode in which she defers to others. People who are overfunctioning, codependent people, parentified people, that is the hallmark, is that they're other focused and they don't really know who they are, and they often don't believe they deserve to have desires, to have wants. They believe they are here to react and mold themselves to other people, whether it's by accommodating someone and enabling them or controlling them. There are controlling people who manifest their other people focus in control, and they also are not in connection with what they want, and they never operate from that. They're always just trying to manage another underfunctioner in their eyes. We saw more of this at the wedding, and I went over those little examples. I can't tell, but I think it's interesting that they ask her directly. You would think she would have an answer to that, right? You would imagine the answer would be no. Now, they are talking about how much they basically still love each other. The way she talks, she is still very much in love with him, I think, today, which is totally normal a year later, by the way, and really points to the reality of this reality show. Now, his feelings towards her, I think, are much harder to trust. The way that she reacts, it's visceral, you know. But at least you'd think she would answer the question. Like if she said, well, if I went with my heart, yes, I would date him. But if I think with my head, no, I'd be wasting my time. Something like that. But she didn't answer. Anyway. And I'm not saying she's a bad person. I hope everyone understands that. I'm just saying it's evidence that she experienced harm, parentification in particular, that denies her the opportunity to feel as though she can answer those questions or even know the answer to those questions is another thing. She might not even have access to her needs and reactions to even really know what she wants, which is another product of parentification and possibly enmeshment. But he says 1,000%. And I think what he's doing right now is trying to be a good guy. I think a more honest, believable response from him would say, well, AD is a wonderful person. I have a lot of feelings for her. And if I just went with my gut, I would date her again. But I know that I'm not really ready, or the way that we come together. My wife we were talking about Clay too, and she was saying that Clay was perhaps another person who goes on the show without really being ready, right? And he literally says that, but there's a possibility. I don't think it's irresponsible for someone to have a track record of not being ready, but want to be ready, right? Wanting to be ready, right? And to go on the show, because it's such an intense, different sort of experience, I don't think it's irresponsible to wonder if the experience might tip the scales for you. You know, you don't have the distractions. You don't have even physical attraction or physical contact. It forces you to focus on the thing that you often will avoid because of your childhood, and you'll avoid connecting in eye contact and conversation and bonding, and just focus on physical aspects and sexuality, and never commit and just go out with friends. And a friend calls you up, hey, let's go out. You're like, hey, okay, and you're doing all this stuff, and an old partner, an old hookup says you up, and you're like, yeah. And going into the experiment, you're cut off from all that, and you think you need that sort of deprivation chamber to actually concentrate and stop being distracted, not letting your vices and your impulses ruin your path in life. I think that that's a viable plan. And if so, you should disclose it. And Clay did. The thing to remember is that Clay was in the edit, and you imagine off camera, he probably said these things as well. He told AD all of these things, and that's why I said this back then, it was just kind of confusing that AD was confused by his response, because it didn't seem out of the blue to me. And I don't blame AD. She was very much in love. She was hoping, and he did give a lot of signals that he might say yes for sure. Anyway, but I do think right now he is being a little performative. That's my guess.
Do you think you would ever date him again?
Yeah, I thought I would just rewind so that we could see that. I don't know what she's thinking. She might be thinking no, but I want to hear what he has to say. I don't know. But I'm also reminded of like the following conversation and all that kind of stuff. Again, it's not some sort of plan, if this is true, that AD would have. It just points to potential traumas that result in her not knowing or feeling that she deserves to have an answer to that question.
Next question.
Clay, would you ever date her again?
1,000%.
Oh my gosh.
Oh.
I want to point out that Clay and Nick both have socks. Has the trend turned? Clay is a pretty snappy dresser. Thank goodness. I mean, I don't know why it bothers me to see other people. Of course, everyone can do what they do. But it just seems so smelly. Because you don't wash your shoes, often anyway. There's a reason, you take your socks off the end of the day, you wash those dogs, and you start anew the next day. Stink up those socks, but you wear the same shoes all the time, no socks. That stink stays.
Because you had your chance that I wouldn't have given you, and there's nothing I wouldn't have done for you. And I feel like, low-key, respectfully, you played in my fucking face. You played in my face, Clay, because you knew you didn't want to get married.
That's not true.
Then why are we not married?
You know, when...
I don't blame AD at all. When you're broken up with as severely as that, it's rough. And I think that it's possible that he was legit on the show. Maybe not, but I don't have any firm reason to believe otherwise. I also don't have any firm reason to believe that he was legitimately on the show, but I don't think it's a slam dunk. There's a good chance we'll never know about a lot of these people because they would have to admit it, right? But I think from the outside, I would imagine the answer to that question that AD is asking, then why are we not married? I think he doesn't want to marry her. I think he doesn't know if it's true. Like, I could see him being in a situation where he's like, I just know that I don't want to marry AD. She's a great person and she makes me feel very loved. And there's no red flags with her. But I just know that I don't want to marry her. It's a chemistry thing, or I don't know. Or I'm not ready to get married, or I'm not ever going to be ready to be. I don't know. I don't know which one that is. I just know it's something because I knew for a while that I did not want to spend the rest of my life with her. Nothing wrong with her, but I just knew. And I, being on the show, have a furthering of my felt sense that maybe I am heading out of my childhood and into myself and the future and maturity of being able to make that commitment, because I did feel that gravitation of that appeal of that. And I think it's actually someone else. And maybe Clay could even say, you have to understand that for me, I'm kind of like a 20-year-old at this point in this way. And when people turn around that age, they start to maybe wonder if they might meet the one, right? And they have a lot of possible ones before they find the one. I have just turned that corner finally of being open. I've basically been a teenager this whole time when it comes to commitment and long-term relationships. But through this process, and AD has helped me, but I've also done a lot of work myself. I've gotten to that point, and so I'm pretty sure AD isn't the one, but I think my one is out there, and I feel finally able to start opening up to that possibility. I can imagine that. I guess the argument is because he didn't marry AD, he must not have been on the show legitimately. I mean, there's another option there. Now, I want to be clear. He might have also been on the show illegitimately. Absolutely. But I just think that the narratives that get kind of thrown out are not fair, not to these people because they'll be fine, I think, but to people in general, because, in life, you're going to run into situations that are akin to this. And I just caution people to not jump to conclusions based on what seems like what the internet would say about it.
I'm sure people who experience this, that's been through the experiment, days are like weeks. Moments in that time at the altar, when she walked down the altar, I swear it was like 3 days of just going back and forth of watching her. She's so beautiful. Clay, you know who you are.
This is very consistent with what he was saying during the show, and it's a furthering of that vibe. He has more nuanced things he's saying right now. And yeah, I mean, I guess it's possible that he would say, if he were being honest and able to investigate this himself, that if it was anyone, it would be AD. And I'm still trying to change or figure out who I am. But I would imagine more likely, if he were honest, he would say what I was saying earlier, which is AD would be a great partner for my life, but I just know it's not AD. I think it's someone else. And it just wasn't really there for me with her. I imagine that could be, because if it was really there, I think he would have given it a shot. But, maybe it's something else.
And for me, Nick, I would say that I didn't put the work in to understand love before I got on the process. And I believe I almost was getting diagnosed on camera as like this red flag or this guy who has, dad issues and something like that.
I think I know what he's saying, and that sounds believable, right? And I think he's saying, well, you just said, he said, I think it's true that I wasn't ready and I shouldn't have come on the show. And I feel like on the show, it really condensed a lot of my issues into, 11 episodes, 12 episodes, which is true. So it also could be just him being a salesman. I don't know. But when you think about other responses that we've seen on the show in situations like this, it doesn't usually look like this in terms of the responses where I'm like, what's going on here? Like Jeremy's response to the lie that he told to Laura that he left out that he actually went to Sarah's house that night. Jeremy's response to that was deflecting and denying, and this is agreeing with the narrative about him, at least some of the elements, but the narrative is like he didn't go on legitimately, and he's a con artist, and he's a psychopathic, pathological liar, right? But he's saying, yeah, I think I didn't go on legitimately, and I wasn't ready to admit that, or I didn't even know that, or I was being too cavalier with the process, but I was trying. I did wonder.
But I receive it. At the end of the day, I didn't do the process right. I disrespected AD. I love her. And it hurts that you don't even think that, so.
Clay.
Yeah.
Do you think you're ready now? It's been a year.
Yeah. I think I put the work in.
Con artists can cry on command, potentially, but it is a tick in the column of believability as he's talking. We tend to cry when we feel sorry for ourselves. That's not a bad thing. It's normal. It's okay. And we cry for a lot of other reasons too. But I think that's what just happened, is that he said, it breaks my heart that you don't think that I loved you, and I did. And I think the self-interested pain he's feeling is, I'm being accused of an awful transgression that is not true about me, and people aren't listening to me. It was a lot of that, I would imagine some of it was a bit of a fabrication, like 10% maybe, 20%, but I imagine a lot of it was totally legit, and his heart was in it, and it hurts him to be accused of that. It's also rejecting, right? It's like I receive all of your love and I reject it as untrue, right? It can be hurtful. So let's rewind that.
Who has, dad issues and something like that. But I receive it. At the end of the day, I didn't do the process right. I disrespected AD. I love her. And it hurts that you don't even think that, so.
Clay.
Yeah.
And there's other elements in there to potentially cry about of, I feel bad. I feel shame for hurting you. It looks genuine to me.
Yeah, I think I put the work in. I wasn't bullshitting. I went to therapy. I tried different therapists out even, trying to see what worked for me. I want to be a good guy. I want to be the best version I could be, and it sucks that it wasn't like that for you.
You are a good guy.
I swear, it wasn't intentional. Like,
Makes me cry. Yeah, looks legit to me. Could be an act, but I think this is the real him. I think he has a lot of pain, and I think he is not given care because he has this very slick persona. And I think he denies his own pain, which is common for people. And I think through therapy or through this process, he's learning to feel those feelings, and they're more readily available to him. And so I think that's what he's expressing. And I don't know, it looks real to me.
Different man, and I have to credit that to AD. So, when someone change your life, you just don't, turn your back on them, and that's just me being here for her.
I applaud you for growth.
Yeah.
I applaud you as a man for being willing to say, I need to take a look at myself, and I need therapy. I want to seek.
Yeah, looks like a lot of people are on board with what he's saying. I don't understand things like as a man. I just think as a person. But yeah, okay.
That out. I want to be a better person for myself and for others. And that takes a lot of courage to, A, one, do, and B, to...
Oh, maybe Nick means that men typically avoid those kinds of things. So, good on you for not doing the toxic masculine thing of avoiding.
Clay's mom and his dad. I thought in watching it with Vanessa, that was a pretty heavy moment, a pretty insightful moment. Did it give you any more understanding as to why things were the way they were?
I think that...
I'm really curious what AD has to say, but it's such a great question that I wouldn't think would be typically asked in a situation like this. Also, just the fact that they had cameras and mics on them to capture that, and they included it because it wasn't super essential. Although you could argue they needed some footage for the weddings episodes, and the Johnny and Amy wedding was not dramatic in terms of anything. So they didn't have much of a choice.
Close the circle for me. There were a lot of missing pieces that I just could not quite understand. And I knew that Clay's parents had gone through their trials, and hearing that conversation really showed me that he was battling things that there's nothing I could have done to take that stress from him. And so hearing that.
Yeah, I heard that from my contact on the show, actually, that she was talking about that conversation as being a very revealing conversation between his parents. And it didn't have that effect on me because I think the difference for me is that I will talk with people like Clay, and I don't need to hear much to hear the significance of it and to feel the significance of it. I think that's what's happening when Clay was talking about what he went through. It's tempting and perhaps a little sexist to hear him say that and not really feel how horrible and how traumatic and how damaging and how vulnerable he was and still is regarding what happened. Just even that one detail about his dad. I mean, there's probably so many other details. The fact that the dad did that indicates the dad probably disregarded Clay in a variety of ways, because you have to seriously disregard your child to rope them into that situation. And the fact that he was cheating, the dad was cheating like over multiple times, multiple years, it sounded that way. So that's just a lot of indication that the dad was still growing up, kind of like Clay, I suppose, and wasn't ready for marriage or having kids, but did it anyway. And that, I didn't have to hear much in addition to that. And I think for some people, when they watch the Clay story develop, you hear that and you think, I don't know what people think, I'm curious, but then you see the conversation and it's right there before you. You're like, oh, I see. I think that's what's happening, because when I watched that conversation, it was a very notable conversation. It totally confirmed a lot of things Clay was saying. It was really nice to see that. The dad, I commend him, and I commended them for not blaming or not deflecting. He, on camera, on mic, was totally open and vulnerable and apologetic, and allowed himself to be hung out to dry, and I commend the mom, for her very caring response but also with some boundaries. It also makes me wonder if the dad had some of that back then, and Clay saw that the dad would say these kinds of things to Clay that would say, you know what, your dad has issues and mom really helps me, and that kind of modeling or something. And by the way, there is a concept within family therapy and development and transgenerational issues that I should mention here called invisible loyalties. You can listen to my episodes on that. But in a nutshell, the idea goes is that as children, we're all born loyal to our caregivers, usually parents, right? And loyalty is a broad word, but specifically what Naj was talking about, the theorist who came up with this, is that children are perhaps born with an instinct to mimic their parents. That's pretty clear. But also to adopt their ways and their point of view and to prefer them. The way that Naj words it or frames it is that the parents are giving a lot to children. I mean, when you just think about all the things that parents do for a 2-year-old or a 5-year-old, it's all encompassing, right? Up to a certain age, you're literally spoon feeding food, and then you're taking their poop and you're loving them and you're putting them in a bed and you're giving them water and you're watching them and keeping them safe. I mean, everything you are giving them. And in return, what children will give, because they can't give in kind, is they will give loyalty. They will give preference. They will give mimicry. They will give preference. You know, they'll say, I prefer you over others, and I worship you, and I want you. I'll make you feel good about yourself by smiling at you and worshiping you. And that's the exchange. There's, you know, each party is getting something, right? And so the children, when there's a problem with the parents, they will be loyal to the good and the bad, right? The other thing is that if there is a deficit in giving from the parents, the child will sometimes adopt a policy of over-loyaltizing themselves to that parent because they're trying to get the parent to make up for the deficit. So the child will be even more like that person and start to think like them and dress like them and act like them and really pay attention to that parent. And that can last into adulthood, where you have the child who, as an adult, even though the parent might not even be alive, but subconsciously, the adult child is still invisibly loyal, meaning unconscious to themselves, loyal and mimicking that parent on the fantasy that that parent will finally give them all of the unmet needs of love and attention and attunement. And through this model, you can explain a lot of people's weird behavior, because I'm quite sure, it's even him saying this, Clay, that Clay did not want his dad to be cheating on his mom and did not want to be dragged along, did not want to be forced to lie to his mom every day of his life. He's currently in that position. He currently, at his age, has to, I was trying to figure out how old he is. Is he in his 30s? Clay is 30, maybe 31 here. He is, to this day, maybe not today because the show came out and he talked about that a little bit, but up until the filming of the show, he does not want to lie by omission to his mom. He doesn't want to be put, that's a horrible position to be in. He doesn't want that. And that is a deficit of care and love and protecting a child from situations like that. You're not only not protecting the child, but you are the danger. You're the problem as the parent. And so it's natural as a child, and probably there's additional things, to feel like there hasn't been enough love and attention and letting me be a kid given to you by your father. And so you grow up in life and you're in this constant state of unconscious wishing that your father would finally make up for that deficit. And, who knows what happened in adulthood between them, but if it went even just normally, you wouldn't get that much because typically adult children don't have that kind of relationship, But the way that Naj, says how we deal with this typically is that we will subconsciously adopt everything about them on the fantasy, hoping that they will see us being like them and then they will love us finally. And that invisible loyalty can last until the day we die, unless we have treatment and awareness and or finally get that love that we deserve. But that doesn't usually happen because if they didn't love us back then, they probably aren't going to love us now. So in the way that we need. So it's not hard to fit that invisible loyalty concept onto this situation. He is an exact replica, or at least his urges are an exact replica of his dad, is not committing, an urge to cheat. And if his dad was kind of like that when he was young, where the dad was able to admit things and admit that he has things to work on, he's loyal to that too. It doesn't mean it's not genuine. It just means that it's hard to change and it'll feel natural even though it's not. And the solution isn't to wrestle yourself into a commitment sort of guy, but to resolve that deficit, to finally get the love, probably from someone else. Sometimes it's a therapist, and you can finally get that love unconditionally that you should have gotten when you were young, or the allowance to be who you are and not have someone impose that on you. Again, a therapist relationship can be a really good venue for that because therapists typically, hopefully, don't impose things on clients for their own selfish benefit and will love and hear and pay attention. And through that corrective experience, the deficit will be fulfilled, and then the invisible loyalty will fade, and then he can finally be himself.
That conversation, I was like, wow, that was deep. And I didn't want to respectfully be Clay's mom in the long run. I didn't want that to be my story.
Yeah.
This is interesting. More acknowledgement of the fix-a-hoe stuff, right? And I think what she's saying is after the altar, she was toying with the idea of maybe continuing with him. And ultimately she said, I don't want to be the overfunctioner, which is great.
It's not, me and my dad have a great relationship in terms of our banter. It hasn't been like I'm sorry, but in his way, it has been. And I feel comfortable with his answer and who he is as a man. I don't like throw any stones at him, because my dad's a good father.
I think what we're hearing is that he wishes that his dad would apologize more thoroughly. He certainly deserves it, several times over, like apologizing periodically for the rest of Clay's life and the father's life. And I think he is trying not to throw his dad under the bus, trying to be respectful of his father, trying to preserve his relationship with his father, trying not to lose his father. But I think because he could have easily lied right there and said, yeah, he apologized and it went well. Or I'll just say we had a really long conversation and it was, he's being pretty clear that it didn't happen. He's saying that we had banter, and so he's sneaking it in. And I also wonder if he doesn't feel entitled to complain. I don't know. If you've ever been in the situation on either side, either as one of the parents or one of the kids, and you have divorce, or let's just go with divorce, and you have one of the parents that is much less around, like the non-custodial parent, and the children are faced with a dilemma at times, especially if there's a lot of fighting or tension in the parents. And sometimes the children will start worshiping the non-custodial parent because there's a lot of reasons for it, but they need to preserve that. They are desperate for that relationship, and they can't tolerate acknowledging what's happening because it's painful, one, but two, if they start to acknowledge it even to themselves, they might communicate it or express it, and they're worried it's going to push the non-custodial, inattentive parent even further away. And so they will convince themselves that that parent is perfect. Sometimes that means they have to start siding with that parent against their custodial parent, even though their custodial parent is much more there. And sometimes single parents will get all of the bad and almost none of the good, and then the non-custodial parent will get all the good and none of the bad. I've seen that. I've treated that before. I've worked with families in the middle of all that. And I wonder if he has adopted something like that and he's still kind of in that mindset where he isn't even allowing himself to acknowledge the pain and the mistreatment. Because after that conversation at the wedding, you would just imagine that the father would do something, apologize even slightly. But Clay is saying he didn't even apologize slightly. We had banter, and I know that he's a good person, is what he's saying. And I think he's also saying I heard in the banter a version of him admitting what he did was wrong. But that's pretty far from the mark, right? And I know, I just know that Clay is deep down, he has a part of himself, an inner child that is that boy that was experiencing all that chaos and he's being used by his dad. I know there's a part of him that deeply wants an apology or care or acknowledgement from the father and is very sad and very angry about it. I say it that way because so often I see others be convinced by presentations like Clay, and particularly men, and maybe even particularly black men, and assume that, oh, they're tough, they're okay, they'll be fine. But that's ridiculous. We just have to remember that is ridiculous, and it's frankly sexist and frankly racist to think that men and black people are born emotionally tougher than everyone else. That's just not the case. It's the opposite in a lot of ways because men are socialized to deny their feelings more often. I mean, everyone is socialized. Everyone's shamed for their feelings, regardless of gender. Boys are shamed more. And so they're more vulnerable, more hurt, more sad, more angry, more neglected. But it's compounded because they can't even, generally speaking, even acknowledge it to themselves. So by the time you get to 31 years old, you just have a lifetime of pain. And I've seen it. In my office. I'll get my, I don't know what sort of metaphor. What's something that I'm picturing R2-D2, and Luke is trying to get that thing out of R2-D2 on Tatooine. He's trying to, what's wrong with, it was like a suppressor of some kind, right? That was controlling R2. And R2's like, I'll show you this message from Princess Leia if you get rid of the suppressor. And Luke's like, yeah, anyway. I've done that with clients where I have pried at that thing and then pop, and then the floodgates, man, and it's intense. I've seen a lot of crying in my office, but that kind of crying, it's violent. It's like that old advertisement, that Maxell or JBL, where that guy's listening to music, and it's just like that. By the way, I like that sort of famous advertisement so much that I bought speakers that are reissues of those JBL speakers. Just a little tidbit. Anyway, so I'm saying all this to remind myself, but also to tell, I don't know about Clay, maybe not, but I would imagine that all of that built up pain, and it deserves to be heard.
This is something that is affecting me because you don't really see from men how to be a good husband. It's always like happy wife, happy life. You don't really hear the experience, especially as a guy like me, I was an athlete, just to how to transition from going from a...
Yeah, he's really smart, actually. I'm reminded of him in the season. He's, in a concise manner, really making that case, right? Now, I will say that I don't agree that there aren't men out there that are providing a good model. I think maybe in his circle or what he pays attention to, but there are many people. I mean, even people on the show. I think Cam would be, I think, a good example of someone that isn't that stereotype or that problem. But yeah, he's even smart enough to identify, that line that men will say, happy wife, happy life. Like, that's the extent of what it takes for a husband to be a good husband, is that essentially, I mean, it depends on what people mean by it, but often what they mean is that if you don't make your wife happy, she's going to make your life hell, because your wife is this hysterical person that will nag and punish you. So you got to obey, you got to go through the motions, and hey, I can't stay out too late drinking because, happy wife, happy life. Instead of, hey, my wife doesn't really like it when I stay out all the time, and I kind of agree with her on that, and so I'm going to not stay out all late tonight. It's a different way of seeing it, where you're on the same team, or you have some, or I guess even if you disagreed, it would be something like, yeah, my wife, she, and I love her, and she is really great, and she has a thing about me staying out late, which I don't really get, but I don't want to freak her out, and I'm going to head home right now or something. I don't know. Yeah, you can still disagree with it, but frame it in a different way. But yeah, so often it's just like this dismissive thing. And that's sort of the best case scenario that I think what he's saying is like, the top-notch husbands are that way, right? And then, of course, you have all these other examples that I've seen where cheating is the norm and disregard is the norm, treating women like dirt, treating them like they're a dime a dozen. There's other women in the world, and so he's smart to point to that.
They put on Love is Blind season 4, and I was referring to Brett. I thought that Brett was, I just felt like he just did everything, like he said all the right things. He just kind of...
Did I speculate about that it might be Brett that he was talking about? At the very least, yeah, it is a good example to follow.
He just personified as a good black man, or a good husband, not even black man, just a good husband. And, I just looked at him and I was like, I don't think that who I am could do what Brett did. So
yeah, I think the internet narrative about Clay is too simplistic. I think it's possible that it's, at least some of the truth, but when you hear stuff like this, it'd be hard to lie this well and detailed and in this way. Why would you lie this way? I think there's a chance that throughout the whole season, he really was telling the truth all the time. And, I said this in the beginning, I said, if he was this jerk-faced liar, he would not, and calculated about his words, he wouldn't be saying, the gym stuff and all that other, I'd say get the rest of him. I think he doesn't have a filter, and there's evidence of that, and he's just very disclosing. And you could argue the dad was too. I mean, he's on camera. He's not a reality TV person, right? And he easily could have just avoided that conversation. And it comes up, and he just and you can tell that he's not resolved regarding the cheating that he did on his wife. It didn't even look like they had that kind of conversation recently or ever. And the dad just admits it, right? Basically. And so I wonder if he just is like that, and it lends itself to credibility, because I think a lot of people assume that as he's saying these things, like about the cheating and stuff, it means, oh, that's the tip of the iceberg, he's shady. And maybe, but I think it's also possible that he truly was on a concerted, well thought out enough journey, and well-meaning journey, and non-harmful journey. Because he also talked about he he has urges of cheating. Why would a con artist even bring that up to someone he's engaged to? It's now maybe it's some sort of weird game or he can't help himself. But now one could argue, even if all that is true, that well, you shouldn't go on a show like this. And maybe that's true. Yeah, the way that he talks and the way he's admitting, I was watching the show and I'm looking for those things. I'll commend him for in order to pull himself out of the influences that he has had in his life, he has to do a lot of things, and he has to do a lot of things without someone telling him to do it. He has to do a lot of things on his own accord. He can't be dragged into it, and we hear that. I sought out a role model by watching past Love is Blind. I went to therapy. I went on this show. I'm doing these things, and that's very commendable. I mean, all of us could be inspired by that, right? To really pay attention to our, and it makes me want to cry again, but really pay attention to our growing edge, as we call them.
Grace, I do it in my own way, and I'm not even happy with that comment, but the compliment is that I do think Brett is a stand-up guy, and I was just looking and, thinking of that sense.
Well, we're lucky to have Brett and Tiffany with us here today.
Yeah!
Guys.
I saw socks on Brett. They were red. I mean, he has it looks like Nike Air vintage things, but Jordans, right? But I hope people would wear socks with those, but I don't know. Watching all the shows in the past, even other shows like 90 Day Fiancé, it just looks like everyone's allergic to socks, all the men.
I don't know why I'm getting emotional talking because I didn't really come from the perfect household either in terms of my mom and my dad and their relationship. And there was a lot of things that I was concerned about how I would show up going through this experiment.
Wow, this reunion. Wow. But usually everyone hates the reunions and Nick and Vanessa. So for me, this is hitting all the, unexpected things that I would never imagine would ever be on a reunion show. This is amazing.
It's very humbling to hear. But even going through everything, I had a lot of doubts and I was very concerned about am I going to be a good husband? Yeah, we good now while we're filming, but when the cameras are off, am I going to know how to show up? Am I really going to know how to?
And good on Kinetic for even having this, because they could easily just divert away from this. Nick actually, connected this conversation, invited Brett in, and good on, I guess, the show for even having them here. I thought it seemed kind of like a gimmick, but this is great. I was kind of doing what I'm now going to kind of condemn, which is to see Brett, the way that he was edited, it just seemed like it was natural for him, but he's saying it wasn't natural. It was hard. I had to go through some stuff. And I think that's really good for, I'm going to cry with all these guys. I guess, what is it that's touching me? I guess, I don't know. It's just good to see goodness. And maybe there's some sort of male thing that's being touched. I don't know. But for Brett, it's good for Clay to see this and not look at Brett as this otherworldly person that it wasn't a struggle. That would tell Clay that's the goal, right? Or I just need to shame myself or something. It's helping Clay to see that it's not quite a leap to get there, because Brett's saying, look, I'm not all the way over here. I'm in a similar camp with you, and I would hope that Brett would be able to tell Clay how he navigated that.
Yeah, man. It's very humbling to hear that, especially black man to black man. I'm humbled. Thank you.
All good.
Yay, positive masculinity. I don't know. It's just kind of funny having an audience. Yay. Yeah, if you're going to applaud for something. All right, well, that does it for that episode. Everyone out there, please take care of yourself because you deserve it. You really, really do.